Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another Read With Me. I'm yours truly, Isabel Bedell, and I'm here to read with you another amazing chapter of the new book that we're reading. It is the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. Irrefutable Laws. Let's get into it. The last video that we did, we went over the law of the lid. And wow. Was that an amazing chapter? Not only did it cover like the amazing story of how McDonald's came to be, but how it was capped at a specific lid due to the leadership of the original founders, which was two brothers. And then how a new leader stepped in and was able to just take that business to where it is today, which is a global monster in the space. Okay. One thing that I'm going to roll over from the last chapter into this new chapter is this line right here. If a person's leadership is strong, the organization's lid is high. But if it's not, the organization is limited. That's why in times of trouble, organizations naturally look for new leadership. When the country is experiencing hard times, it elects a new president. When a company is losing money, it hires a new CEO. When a church is floundering, it searches for a new senior pastor. And when a sports team keeps losing, it looks for a new coach. So, with that in mind, let's get into chapter number 2, the law of influence. This is the second law of this amazing book. It is the law of influence. The true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. What do leaders look like? Do they always look powerful, impressive, charismatic? How do you measure the effectiveness of a leader? Can you put two people side by side and instantly tell which is the better leader? There are questions people have asked for years, for hundreds of years. One of the most effective leaders of the late 20th century was anything but impressive upon first appearance. When most people think of Mother Teresa, they envision a frail little woman dedicated to serving the poorest of the poor. That she was. But she was also a tremendous leader. I say that because she had an amazing amount of influence with others. And if you don't have influence, you will never be able to lead others. Small stature, big impact. Lucinda Vardy, who worked with Mother Teresa on the book The Simple Path, described the nun as the quintessential, energetic entrepreneur who has perceived a need and done something about it, built an organization against all odds, formulated its constitution, and sent out branches all over the world. The organization Mother Teresa founded and led is called the Missionaries of Charity. While other vocational orders in the Catholic Church were declining, hers grew rapidly, reaching more than 4,000 members during her lifetime, not including numerous volunteers. Under her direction, her followers served in 25 countries on 5 continents. In Calcutta alone, she established a children's home, a center for people with leprosy, and home for people who were dying and destitute, and a home for people suffering with tuberculosis or mental disorders. The kind of organizational building that can be accomplished only by a true leader. Mother Teresa's impact reached far beyond her immediate environment. People from all walks of life and from nations all around the globe respected her. And when she spoke, people listened. Author and former presidential speechwriter Peggy Newman wrote about a speech Mother Teresa gave at the National Prayer Breakfast in 1994. It illustrates her level of influence with others, and Newman observed. The Washington establishment was there, plus 1,000 born-again Christian, Orthodox Catholics, and Jews. Mother Teresa spoke of God, of love, of families. She said she must love one another and care for one another. There were great purrs of agreement. But as the speech continued, it became more pointed. She spoke of unhappy parents in old people's homes who are hurt because they are forgotten, she asked. Are you willing to give until it hurts in order to be with our families, or do we put our own interests first? Ask yourself that question. Are you willing to give until it hurts in order to be with our families? Or do we put our own interests first? The baby boomers in the audience began to shift in their seats, and she continued, I feel the greatest destroyer of peace today is abortion, she said, and told them why in uncompromising terms. For about 1.3 seconds, there was silence. Then applause swept the room. But not everyone clapped. The president, the first lady, Bill and Hillary Clinton, the vice president, and Mr. Gore looked like seated statues at Madame Tussauds moving, not a muscle. Mother Teresa didn't stop there either. And when she was finished, there was almost no one she hadn't offended. At that time, if just about any other person in the world had made those statements, people's reactions would have been openly hostile. They would have booed, jeered, and stormed out, but the speaker was Mother Teresa. She was probably the most respected person on the planet at that time. So everyone listened to what she had to say, even though many of them violently disagreed with her. And in fact, every time that Mother Teresa spoke, people listened. Why? Well, she was a real leader. And when real leaders speak, people listen. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. That's pretty wild. So she literally went on stage, spoke in front of hundreds of thousands of people, literally had the president sitting in a chair with the vice president. And she was just jabbing. She was just like, abortion sucks. You guys suck at this. People that leave their parents in a home suck. You think that you are better than others. Are you willing to put your own interests first? And she's just jabbing away. But because she was one of the most respected people on earth around that time, people listened. That's strong. Leadership is not, and here's an example of what leadership is not. Leadership is often misunderstood, and when people hear that someone has an impressive title or an assigned leadership position, they assume that individual to be a leader. And sometimes that's true, but titles don't have much value when it comes to leading. True leadership cannot be awarded, appointed, or assigned. It comes only from influence, and that cannot be mandated. It must be earned. The only thing a title can buy is a little time. Either you increase your level of influence with others or to undermine it. Here's 5 myths about leadership. There are plenty of misconceptions and myths that people embrace about leaders and leadership. And here are the 5 common ones. The management myth, okay? Myth number 1 is the management myth. A widespread misunderstanding is that leading and managing are one of the same. Up until a few years ago, books that claimed to be on leadership were often really about management. The main difference between the two is that leadership is about influencing people to follow, while management focuses on maintaining systems and processes. As former Chrysler chairman and CEO Lee Iacocca Riley commented, sometimes even the best managers is like the little boy with the big dog, waiting to see where the dog wants to go so that he can take him there. The best way to test whether a person can lead rather than just manage is to ask him to create positive change. Managers can maintain direction, but often they can't change it. Systems and processes can only do so much. To move people in a new direction, you need influence. Number two, the entrepreneur myth. Frequently, people assume that all entrepreneurs are leaders, but that's not always the case. Entrepreneurs are skilled at seeing opportunities and going after them. They see the needs and understand how to meet them in a way that produces a profit. But not all of them are good with people, and many find it necessary to partner with someone skilled at that people part of the equation. If they can't influence people, they can't lead. That's a strong one. I like his definition of entrepreneurs. They see needs and understand how to meet them in a way that produces a profit. That's strong. Knowledge myth. The knowledge myth. Number 3. Sir Francis Bacon said, knowledge is power. And if you believe to be the essence of leadership, then you might naturally assume that those who possess knowledge and intelligence are therefore leaders. That isn't necessarily true. You can visit any major university and meet brilliant research scientists and philosophers whose ability to think is so high that is off the charts, but whose ability to lead is so low that it doesn't even register on the charts. Neither IQ nor education necessarily equates to leadership. Here's number 4, the pioneer path. Another misconception is that anyone who is out in front of the crowd is a leader. But being first isn't always the same as leading. So for example, Sir Edmund Hillary was the first man to reach the summit of Mount Everest. Since his historic ascent in 1953, hundreds of people have followed him in achieving that feat. But that doesn't make Hillary a leader. He wasn't even the official leader on the expedition when he reached the summit. John Hunt was. And when Hillary traveled to the South Pole in 1958 as a part of the Commonwealth Trans-Antarctic expedition, he was accompanying another leader, Sir Vivian. I don't want to say that. F-U-C-H's. Fuzz. To be a leader, a person has not only be out front, but also have people intentionally coming behind him, following his lead and acting on his vision. Being a trendsetter is not the same as being a leader. Yeah. And I think that's what's happening in today's time about being an influencer, confusing influencer with being a leader, because a lot of people can become influencers through the content that they're creating as creators, but they just suck at being leaders. So don't get the two twisted. Got it. The position myth. Number 5. As mentioned earlier, the greatest misunderstanding about leadership is that people think it is based on position, but it's not. Think about what happened several years ago at Cordian, the advertising agency formerly known as Saatchi & Saatchi, in 1994. In 1994, institutional investors of Saatchi & Saatchi forced the board of directors to dismiss Maurice Saatchi, the company's CEO. What was the result? Well, several executives followed him out. So did many of the company's largest accounts, including British Airways and Mars, the candy maker. Saatchi's influence was so great that his departure caused the company's stock to fall immediately from 8 5/8 to $4 per share. What happened is a result of the law of influence. Saatchi lost his title and position, and he continued to be the leader. Stanley Hufty affirmed, it's not the position that makes a leader, it's the leader that makes the position. I like that one. So who's the real leader? Many years ago, there was a game show on television called To Tell the Truth. And here's how it worked. At the opening of the show, 3 contestants claimed to be the same person, and one of them was telling the truth. The other 2 were actors. A panel of celebrity judges took turns asking the 3 people questions, and when time was up, each panelist guessed which person was a real truth teller. And many times the actors bluffed well enough to fool the panelists and the members of the audience. And when it comes to identifying a real leader, the task can be much easier. Don't listen to the claims of the person professing to be the leader. Don't examine his credentials. Don't check his title. Don't check all of that. Only check his influence. The proof of leadership is found in the followers. Not on your Instagram, ladies and gentlemen, not on Instagram, TikTok, or whatever it is, YouTube. Check the influence in the real world, in the real life, okay? I personally learned the law of influence when I accepted my first job out of college. I went in with all the right credentials. I had the proper college degree. I had a great deal of insight into the work because of all the training given to me by my father. I possessed the position and the title of leader in the organization. It made for a good-looking resume, but it didn't make me the real leader. At first, my board meeting, I quickly found out who the real leader was. It was a farmer named Claude. When he spoke, people listened. When he made a suggestion, people respected it. When he led, others followed. If I wanted to make an impact, I would have to influence Claude. He, in turn, would influence everybody else. And it was the law of influence at work. Leadership is. The true measure of leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Margaret Thatcher, the former British Prime Minister, observed, being in power is like being a lady. If you have to tell people you are, you aren't. If you watch the dynamics that occur between people in just about every aspect of life, you will see some people leading and others following. And you will notice that position and title often have little to do with who is really in charge. That being the case, why do some people emerge as leaders while others can't influence people no matter how hard they try? And I believe that several factors come into play. Character, it's who they are. True leadership always begins with the inner person. That's why someone like Billy Graham is able to draw more and more followers to him as time goes by. People can sense the depth of his character. Relationships, who they know. You're a leader only if you have followers, and that always requires the development of relationships. The deeper the relationships, the stronger the potential for leadership. In my career, each time I entered a new leadership position, I immediately started building relationships. Build enough of the right kinds of relationships with the right people, and you can become the real leader in an organization. Another one, knowledge. Knowledge is what they know. Information is vital to a leader. You need a grasp of the facts, an understanding of dynamic factors and timing, and a vision for the future. Knowledge alone won't make someone a leader, but without knowledge, no one can become one. Whenever I was new to an organization, I always spent a lot of time doing homework before I tried to take the lead. Intuition, what they feel. Leadership requires more than just a command of data. It demands an ability to deal with numerous intangibles. In fact, that is one of the main differences between managers and leaders. Leaders seek to recognize and influence intangibles such as energy, morale, timing, and momentum. Experience, where they've been. The greater the challenges you face as a leader in the past, the more likely followers are to give you a chance in the present. Experience doesn't guarantee credibility, but it encourages people to give you a chance to prove that you are capable. Past success, what you've done. Nothing speaks to followers like a good track record. When I went to my first leadership position, I had no track record. I couldn't point to past successes to help people believe in me. But by the time I went to my second position, I had a positive track record. Every time I extended myself, took a risk, and succeeded, followers had another reason to trust my leadership and ability and to listen to what I had to say, which then leads into ability, what they can do. The bottom line for followers is that what a leader is capable of. They want to know whether that person can lead the team to victory. And ultimately, that's the reason people will listen to you and acknowledge you as their leader. As soon as they no longer believe you can deliver, they will stop listening and following. As soon as they no longer believe you can deliver, they will stop listening and following. Leadership without leverage. If you want to find out how good your leadership really is, then try leading volunteers as a volunteer in a nonprofit organization. A lot of business people I know are surprised when I suggest that. But I say because positional leadership often doesn't work in a volunteer organizations. There's no leverage. In other organizations, the person who has the position has incredible leverage. In the military, leaders can use rank and, if all fails, throw people into a brig. In business, bosses have tremendous leverage in the firm in the form of salary, benefits, and perks. Most followers are pretty cooperative when their livelihood is at stake. But in voluntary organizations, the thing that works is leadership in its purest form, influence. Psychologist Harry Overstreet observed, the very essence of all power to influence lies in getting the other person to participate. Followers in voluntary organizations cannot be forced to get on board. If the leader has no influence with them, then they won't follow. Recently, a meeting where I was speaking to a group of company presidents and CEOs, one participant asked for advice on finding the best leaders in his organization. My advice was to ask candidates to lead a volunteer organization for 6 months. If those leaders can get people to follow them when they have no leverage, recruiting employees to volunteer, serve the community, work with the United Way, and so on, then you know that they can influence others. That is the mark of a true leadership ability. From commander to private to commander-in-chief. One of my favorite stories that illustrates the law of influence concerns Abraham Lincoln. In 1832, decades before he became president, young Lincoln gathered together a group of men to fight in the Black Hawk War. In those days, the person who put together a volunteer company for the militia often became its leader and assumed a commanding rank. In this instance, Lincoln was given the rank of captain, but Lincoln had a problem. He knew nothing about soldiering, he had no prior military experience, and he knew nothing about tactics. He had trouble remembering the simplest military procedures. So, for example, one day Lincoln was marching a couple dozen men across a field and needed to guide them through a gate into another field, but he couldn't manage it. Recounting the incident later, Lincoln said, I could not for the life of me remember the proper word of command for getting my company endwise. Finally, as we were near the gate, I shouted, the company is dismissed for 2 minutes. When it will fall again on the other side of the gate. As time went by, Lincoln's level of influence with others in the military actually decreased. While other officers proved themselves and gained rank, Lincoln found himself going in the other direction. He began as a captain, but the title and position did him little good. He couldn't overcome the law of influence, and by the end of the military service, Abraham Lincoln found himself in his rightful place, having achieved the rank of private. Fortunately for Lincoln and for the fate of the United States, he overcame his inability to influence others. Lincoln followed his time in the military and with undistinguished things in the Illinois state legislature and the U.S. House Representative, But over time, with much effort and personal experience, he became a person of remarkable influence and impact, and one of the nation's finest presidents. I love the leadership proverb that says, "He who thinks he leads, but has no followers, is only talking a walk, is only taking a walk. He who thinks he leads, but has no followers, is only taking a walk." If you can't influence people, then they will not follow you. And if people won't follow you, you are not a leader. That's the law of influence. No matter what anybody else may tell you, remember that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And here's how you can actually apply the law of influence into your life today. Okay. Number one, which of the myths in the chapter have you bought into the past? Management, entrepreneur, knowledge, pioneer, or position? Why have you been susceptible to that myth? What does that say about your perception of leadership until now? What must you change in your current thinking to make you more open to improving your leadership in the future? Wow, such great questions, right? Number two, what do you usually rely upon most to persuade people to follow you? Rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10 for each of the 7 factors named in the chapter. 1 means it's not a factor, while 10 means you rely on it continually. Character, relationships, knowledge, intuition, experience, past success, and ability. Rate them from 1 to 10. 1 being the least, and 10 means you rely on it continually. How can you optimize or better utilize the ones with low scores? I'm gonna do that after this. Number 3, find an organization for which you can volunteer in. Pick something that you believe in, for example, a school, soup kitchen, or community project, and offer your time and energy. If you believe you have leadership ability, then try leading. You will learn to lead through influence. That's a really good one. Go to a nonprofit and volunteer, and then you will learn to lead through influence. That's really good. Awesome. That concludes chapter 2, or the law of influence. I would love to hear from you what that order is as far as, from the 1 to 10. Which one do you usually rely upon most to persuade people to follow you? And I would love to understand about, the character, the relationships, knowledge, intuition, experience, how all of that has been laid out, the past success and the ability, really digging deep into that, and how maybe you've learned to become a person of influence. And if you're not a person of influence and you know it, being able to say it out loud and then finding ways to make that happen. Because just like Abraham, he was mentioning that he sucked at leading. Like even in the military, he was just like really bad at getting people to follow orders or to guide them into a specific place, with a command. But eventually he learned where he was in the influence spectrum, and then he was able to apply the disciplines, the principles, and the step-by-step process to become a person of influence. And that's definitely something that I want to take into account here, because it's very, very important, especially with where we're looking to go, where we're looking to take, our business, our life, our relationships, and most importantly, how we can lead you into a better realm of personal and financial freedom on this particular channel. So I'm so excited for what's to come. If you like this chapter, make sure to hit like, subscribe, share it with a friend, and hope you got a lot of value out of it. Talk to you soon.